Bruce, it's great to see you. And I want to throw this out that the last time I saw you was at Canadian Music Week when you were being honored. And I remember I didn't want to bother you, but I had to come over by your table. I said like a really quick hello. You said hello, and then I took off because, like I said, I didn't want to bother you too much. And I think it was the same night Quincy Jones was there too. It was a really, really special night. Do you remember that?
Uh, it, I remember aspects of it.
You know what? It's completely understandable because so much is going on in your career, and I got to say, your music has been a big part of my life, which is why it's an honor to have a chance to speak with you about this new music that you've released and tour coming up. Before we begin, though, I just wanted to catch some quick words for you. Of course, one of the greatest songwriters, Gordon Lightfoot, just passed away as we
Yes.
speak. Any thoughts on his career? Because I know you knew him well.
Well, it would be overstating to say I knew him well. I certainly was acquainted with the man. I had admired him as a songwriter, especially in the early days when he kind of appeared on the scene. Uh, and I was just like a fledgling kind of music guy with a great interest in the folk scene and some connection with it in Ottawa. But all of a sudden, here's this guy from Aurelia that is writing these great songs and playing and singing beautifully, and he made a very strong impression, and not just because the quality of his stuff, but that which was most of it, but also because he was coming from a background that in the sort of the attitudes that were prevalent at the time, good people didn't come from, which was Canada. I mean, basically, I got into an argument on the street one time with a guy over whether Joni Mitchell was Canadian because, and he said, and I quote, "She can't be Canadian. She's too good." And so to have somebody like Gordon come along, who was clearly that good, and be clearly that Canadian as well, I mean, you can people wouldn't have necessarily known about Joni or some of the other artists at the time because they had moved to the States or elsewhere, and it seemed as though you had to get that stamp of approval and come back to be seen as legitimate in Canadian eyes. But Gordon never left. Gordon was right here the whole time, and really became identified. Well, I think he identified himself with Canada in some way that meant a lot to him. So yeah, he was an important guy, and maintained a high quality of output for over his whole career. So good for him. And I mean, you, you sort of want to say things like "I'm sorry he's gone," et cetera, but he had a great run, and he was probably ready to go. But um, there's a hole where he was for sure.
Absolutely, absolutely, and thank you for those words. You, my friend, Canadian Fabric, telling stories uh, through your music. How has it been for you for so many decades to be able to tell your stories, not just the Canadian stories, but the stories around the world in the way you write your songs and talking about not just the beauty, but the horror that goes on in the world today?
Yeah, there's plenty of horror. I mean, I don't find myself as inclined to talk about it now at this point because it's just so evident everywhere you look, and the we get plenty of news about how horrible everything is, but you can't ignore it, and it's because it's part of life. It's an appropriate part of art as well, and art includes songwriting. So sometimes it does show up. I think if you're going to write about life in a realistic sense, you can't leave that out because it has an effect, and you don't have to dwell on it. You don't have to go into the gory details, but none of us can sit here and looking around the world and not notice and not be emotionally affected by it, not have our thoughts shaped by the stuff we see around us. So, it's always seemed to me that all of that stuff that we see around us is appropriate material for songs. And so that's what I'm not sure tried is the right word, because it's more of a reflex. It's not so intentional, but that's what I've ended up writing about, is everything that I can get hold of.
Then let's talk about this point in your career, sir, because we are talking about a new album, Oh Sun, Oh Moon. What's the inspiration behind this? Because I had a chance to listen to the whole album, which I think is absolutely brilliant, and especially one particular song, and I'll explain why in a moment. But what was the inspiration behind it?
Well, time and space, like as with all my stuff, the songs are a product of the period of time in which they're being written and the situation I'm in when they're being written. So, they reflect that. These songs are the product of the last 2 or 3 years of what we've all lived through, and that includes COVID and Trump, and what we see around us in terms of environmental degradation and all that sort of stuff. And it also has a lot to do with my own advancing age, and so the way life is reflected off of me in the form of those songs is the way they're reflected off an old guy and not a kid. So that's part of it too.
It's so funny that you talked about, everything that we were seeing for the last 3 years. That's exactly the way I felt when I listened to this album, especially with the song Oh Sun by Day, Oh Moon by Night. To me, that particular song itself represented almost everything that we've been going through.
Well, I'm glad you got that. I mean, for me, the song came from a dream, as it says in the song. I'm basically recounting a dream with an added chorus. I wasn't singing like that in a dream, but we're in the dream. I was confronted with, or I found myself in front of, as the song talks about, this big wall with huge bronze gates and the guardian angel standing in front. My phone ringing, and I'm going to shut it down right now. It is, for some reason, Royal Bank wants to talk to me, but too bad. Bad timing on their part. Anyway, in this dream, I'm confronted with this situation, and I asked the angel if it's okay if I keep going. Do you mind if I go through? There's this big gate, and the gate opens, and I don't think I go through in the dream. I see what's on the other side, and what's on the other side is more road. It's not the pearly gates, but and so the sung part of the chorus is really a plea for guidance on that road. But I mean, I think certainly at my age, and I'm not alone in this because there are many people my age, that horizon, that wall with the bronze gates is kind of looming quite large. Like when you're 25, it's still out there. You could die anytime. Anybody can die anytime, but you don't have to think about it the same way, or at least you're not invited to think about it the same way as when you get older. And it's like, okay, well, this is the real deal, and it's coming one of these days. I don't feel it. Like I'm not expecting it tomorrow, but it isn't as far off as it once seemed. So those kinds of reflections show up in the songs, actually in that song particularly, but in some of the other ones also. And there's nothing like a pandemic to kind of remind you, in case you were inclined to forget about that horizon, that it's right out there.
The other song for me that's so special is Colin Went Down to the Water. The reason why for that is because my older brother was named Colin. He passed away several years ago from throat cancer. So the second I heard that song, it just touched me in a special way. What was that song originally for you about?
Uh, it was about a friend of mine. People wonder if it's Colin Linden who produced the album, and no, it isn't. It's a different Colin, but Colin Pierce. And Colin Pierce was a guy from the Isle of Man who lived in San Francisco for a while and then moved to Maui and became a friend while we were both living in San Francisco. Um, and two summers ago, we spent most of July in Maui. My family and I and some other friends um, rented a house and just hung out there for most of that month. And I had called my friend Colin to let him know we were there, and we were making plans to meet for a drink in a few days. But between the phone call and the appointed time for the drink, he drowned in a scuba accident. He was an avid diver and was actually trying to get into the scuba business in some way, and came to grief. I'm not quite sure how, but so that's the origin of that song. It's really this, this. Maui's a beautiful place for people who haven't been there. It's beautiful. I was kind of concerned that in July it might be too hot, but it was hot, but not too hot. And the trade winds blowing off the ocean the whole time and keeping it sort of temperate. So and the physical beauty of the place is legendary. And then you'd look out at this ocean scene, and the ocean scene included the death of this guy. So, again, we come back to the horizon, I guess.
Well, my condolences to you and the family also for that, but such a beautiful song. What
Thanks.
keeps you going in being able to tell these amazing stories? Is it still an impulse for you that it just comes to you to write? Is it easier to write these days than it was, say, back when we were first introduced to you?
I'll go backwards on that. No, it's not easier, nor is it really harder. It's a little different because, for one reason, I've said a lot of stuff already, and I don't want to keep on saying the same stuff all the time, or at least if I am, I've got to think of new ways to say it. So that part's a little bit harder, but in general, it's the same. You said reflex. I think it's the same reflex it always was. It's the a kind of need, almost like a biological urge to just get it out there. And I'll go for a long stretch without writing anything, and that after a while I start to feel like that urge is building up, and when I start feeling that, sooner or later a song will come. Sometimes it's later than I like, but with this album, I mean, that visit to Maui produced 5 songs, like in the course of just under a month, and for me, that's an extraordinary pace. So I was very happy about that. But and the other songs came out just over the period of time since the last album. But yeah, it's a mystery to me, really, why it's there. I feel like it's given to me. I feel like these songs are kind of put there for me to find, in a way, and the trick is to find them.
And you've definitely found them for us too. And you're going to be able to share that also. Tour is happening with you, sir.
Yeah, we're hitting the road as of June 1st, and I say we, it's a royal we. It's just me, me and a tour manager, but solo shows. But there'll be a lot of those through June. There's a few in August, and in the UK, and one in BC, and then more stuff in Eastern North America in October, and it will continue after that. We're looking at shows next April now and May. So
Two more very quick questions because I know we're going to have to wrap this up. One, I have to ask you about Wondering Where the Lines Are, my all-time favorite song from you. And I've read about the inspiration, and I've listened to that song over and over and over again. Did you ever think that song would be such a staple point in your career, especially because of what the song originally is about and how you told the story?
no, I mean, I've never imagined anything, any song was going to sort of achieve any particular status with people. You don't know. You can't second guess that, or at least I can't. Bernie Finkelstein, my manager, has a pretty good sense of that, actually, better than I do. But I liked the song when I wrote it. I thought, I thought that people would like it, and but so I had no idea that it would, get the attention that it got. And it's still fun to sing, actually. I mean, there was a period in the maybe somewhere in the '90s I got really sick singing it, and I had to let it lie fallow for a while. But it came back, and I like singing it now, and audiences like it, so people sing along with it and stuff. So that's
Yeah, I'm
fun.
one of them. I'm definitely one of them. Last question. How do you want your career to be remembered when we're still listening to that song and this new album and all the rest of your songs? How do you want your career to be remembered?
Um, well, Demigod would be all right. Um, I don't know. I sort of don't really care. It's. I mean, actually that I do care. I want people to remember me with affection. Uh, with some kind of warm feelings. It would be nice if that happens, but it's not really within my control. So, you know.
I don't think you have anything to worry about there. Definitely warm and wonderful feelings when I think about you and your music. Thank you so much for your time. Congratulations with this new album. Thank you for being such an important part of me growing up throughout the 80s, 90s, whatever. Just the fact of being able to hear your music and knowing that it was Canadian was something important for me. Thank you again for the interview, and have a great tour. I'm hoping I can be able to stop at one of those shows to see you live.
Well, if you make it, be sure and say hi. And thank you
I
very much
definitely
for the time on the air.